This reading is from Rays of the One Light by Swami Kriyananda, and I actually would like to read week 1, which we had missed last week due to Yoganandaji's birthday, and that's part of what these other photos of Master are here on the altar, sort of completing our celebration of his birthday, which was January 5th. So this is the first reading of the book, week 1, At the Heart of Silence, the Eternal Word. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramhansa Yogananda. In the Bible, in the Gospel of St. John, these immortal lines appear. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God. All things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. And the light shineth in darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not. Human vision beholds individuality and separation everywhere. Divine vision beholds the oneness of cosmic vibration, of which all things, no matter how diverse, are manifestations. Cosmic sound, the quote, Word of God, and cosmic light, these are eternal. The world, as revealed to us by our senses, is illusory. In Autobiography of a Yogi, Paramhansa Yogananda relates an early experience he received of the divine aspect of reality. Sitting on my bed one morning, Yoganandaji writes, I fell into a deep reverie. What is behind the darkness of closed eyes? This probing thought came powerfully into my mind. An immense flash of light at once manifested to my inward gaze. Divine shapes of saints, sitting in meditation posture in mountain caves, formed like miniature cinema pictures on the large screen of radiance within my forehead. Who are you? I spoke aloud. We are the Himalayan yogis. The celestial response is difficult to describe. My heart was thrilled. Ah, I long to go to the Himalayas and become like you. The vision vanished, but the silvery beams expanded in ever-widening circles to infinity. What is this wondrous glow? I am Ishwara. I am light. The voice was as murmuring clouds. I want to be one with thee. Out of the slow dwindling of my divine ecstasy, I salvaged a permanent legacy of inspiration to seek God. The reading now continues. Wise are we if we meditate on that experience of Yogananda's and salvage from it even a breath of his inspiration. For, quite simply, there is nothing else. As the Bhagavad Gita says in the 7th chapter, I make and unmake this universe. Apart from me, nothing exists, O Arjuna. All things, like the beads of a necklace, are strung together on the thread of my consciousness, and are sustained by me. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om, Om. As I said in the beginning, this reading is one that we often miss if we're strictly going by the weeks of the year, because of it being Yoganandaji's birthday, the first Sunday of the year. We're usually celebrating that with a special program or a special satsang or several, as we did this past week. And so it's nice to be able to read the first reading. After all, it is starting us off into these 52 weeks of study and also of covering the entirety of the spiritual path, at least in terms of its breadth. It's wonderful how Swamiji gives these parallel commentaries from the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita, again, as we've said before, following in the tradition started by Sri Yukteswarji, commissioned by Babaji. How Babaji appeared to him at the Kumbh Mela and asked him to write a book comparing the teachings in the Bible and the teachings in the Hindu scriptures, as he put it, and he drew from several scriptures. But that book became the Holy Science, and Yoganandaji followed in that same tradition. In fact, a visitor once asked Yoganandaji, "Why do you call your church the church of all religions when you focus primarily on the teachings of Christianity and Hinduism, meaning only two religions?" And Yoganandaji had given several answers to this question, or this kind of question, before that Swami Kriyananda had heard. But on that occasion, he told this visitor, because it was the will of Babaji. Just that's it. I'm following orders here. This is his mission that I'm carrying out. And at other times, Swamiji explained, quoting Master and also expanding on that for one thing, it's if you can show that two religions have the same essence, which you can very accurately call that essence Sanatana Dharma, then you can, if you can see the unity of truth there, and two, then that you can infer then the unity of all religions. If you can show two are the same at their essence, then you can show that all are the same. Of course, there will be difference in temperament, in taste. We may feel more drawn in one direction than another. We feel drawn to yoga, also to our guru and our line of gurus. Obviously, there will be a yearning of the heart, a place where we fit in. But still, from that, we should look for unity. We should look for things that unite us. As, again, the word yoga even means literally union. And so as yogis, we should be looking for things that bring us together rather than things that keep us apart or things that are different and so on. It's very much a both and philosophy of life, as opposed to an either or philosophy. Human beings, it's very tempting to just see separation everywhere. This is partly what Maya does, is it separates. It makes us think that I am different from this person, and all of these things that even more subtly than that anything we perceive is the entirety of the reality. But as Swamiji writes, it's light and sound, vibration, are the eternal things. This, and Master would say it often, that everything you see is nothing but a motion picture of God. He said, we are nothing but the television of God. That, God is creating these scenes out of himself or out of light. But they're not real in any lasting sense, any more than a movie is real, in the sense that the characters are real. They're not real. The actors are real. That particular scene, when they filmed it, actually happened, but it's a show. As Master said, it's a show. He said people come to earth for the purpose of being educated and entertained. And he said, but how few souls are either educated or entertained. At another time, he said, this planet is really a hospital. And he added, and a zoo. So something to meditate on. Makes you wonder, first of all, which category we fall into. And if we think we're looking through the bars at the creatures in the zoo, we should double check to make sure which side of the bars we're on. Are they in the cage of the zoo, or are we? So, in other words, are we outside looking in or inside looking out? So, as I was saying, we can be so tempted to think that I see this person, I know this person, and that's who they are. Swamiji shared an experience of one of his fellow direct disciples, Brother Mokshananda. Mokshananda had come to Master at the very end of his life, Master's life, and this is described in the New Path in that last chapter covering Master's life. He had been, I think Mokshananda came just the week of Master's passing. And it was interesting, in fact, Master had heard that Mokshananda was coming. I mean, he had a different name, of course. I can't recall it at the moment. But and Master said, they told me you had come and were interested in, I don't know the whole process, but basically Master knew this was potentially a new disciple. And Master, Swamiji relates the story, that Master said to him, I heard that you had come, and I saw you from my third-story window, but apparently Mokshananda was looking down or something, or not looking up. And Master said, but I waited until you looked up so that I could see your eyes, because it was by seeing your eyes that then I knew that, of course, he was a part of the family. It's interesting to think about, because, of course, Master could have known or did know even before any of this happened, but that's the way he put it, that it was through the eyes. Why? Because it wouldn't be instructive to us all if Master said, I know everything at all times. You don't, but I do. Isn't that good for me? We don't learn anything from that except to bow and adore and worship him, which is quite nice, but as he, meaning it's quite appropriate, but he said, the Guru's job is to make you what he is. He was here to teach, to train, to help. The doctor coming into the hospital doesn't brag to all the patients, see how healthy I am. You poor fools. No, his job is to help those from where they are to get well, to get better, to heal. And so that's exactly what Master was. In fact, he said, the Guru is your spiritual doctor. He said, if you go to the doctor and he gives you a prescription, for some medicine, and instead you tear it up and throw it away, it won't help you. And he said, neither if you frame the prescription and hang it on your wall and gaze at it admiringly, but don't actually have it filled. Don't do the regimen prescribed. It won't help you. He said, the Guru is your spiritual doctor. You must do what he says. Not only nod and not only just worship, but to do, to follow. And so, anyway, to Leland Standing, I think, or something was Mokshananda's name, something like that. So, Swamiji related this story, however, that he said Mokshananda was I don't know exactly how he put it, but something like a quieter person. He was not a dynamic speaker who was on stage, speaking to big crowds. He was not very, again, outwardly creative and making a big splash that way, all these full of ideas and things. Swamiji felt very close to Mokshananda. They secluded together, I think, was it for a month? And he said they became very close in that way. And in fact, they were in silence the whole time. Every now and then they would write a note to each other if they had to. And then, but there was one time, because I guess they were taking turns cooking for each other, and he came, they both were in the kitchen at the same time, and Swamiji said he saw this, just this awful looking thing in a pan, which was presumably lunch, and he spoke out loud and said to Mokshananda, "What's that?" And Mokshananda said, "Spinach." And Swamiji said that was our only verbal conversation in a month. And so anyway, he had great love for Mokshananda. But he said again, the man appeared to be a rather low key, for lack of a better word, in terms of his personality. But Swamiji said when Mokshananda died, which was in the, I think it was in the mid-1980s, I'm not sure of the exact date, but the exact year, but around that time. And Swamiji went to his funeral. And Swamiji said at the funeral, he felt the spirit of Mokshananda, which was not uncommon for Swamiji. He would often describe how he would feel the spirit of somebody close to him passing, his father, for example. So he said that Mokshananda's consciousness or soul liberated from the body was so dynamic, so full of energy, so much bigger, you could say, than the impression that he gave outwardly through his personality. It was so much more. And this is something that other people have shared too, in terms of if they've felt close to someone after their passing. Felt that person after their passing. So again, it's just a reminder of how any little thing that we see and think that's the entirety of the story, it's not. Either with ourselves or with others. It's better not to think, to judge, to analyze, to critique, but to love, as the affirmation was today. To realize that love is not ours. In fact, there was a song I almost chose for today, which I probably should have. Prasanna offered it, "What is Love?" And I was thinking, well, how about Come Gather Round, because it's a little, upbeat, and we're, starting off the year, but What is Love would have been equally, or perhaps a better choice. What is love? Is it only ours, or does love whisper in the flowers? Surely we, children of this world, could not love by our own powers. This is the question, what is love, that's asked. And in the song Swamiji wrote. He wrote it for a group of people whom he was performing for in a church of people who, if you can believe it, said that they didn't really believe in God. Well, then how is it a church? But anyway, not to go into all of that. So he wrote this song basically for their skepticism, for their question, rather than going directly to speak of, give a lecture about God, to ask the question, what is love? This also came up, in fact, in a conversation with somebody. Swamiji was driving someone, a man, and also a young woman home. This was, I think, in the 1960s, somewhere from a party or something. They were driving home. And the man had told Swamiji, I'm an atheist, and I don't believe in God. And then, through the course of the conversation in the car ride, this young woman said that, I think she was like 17 or something like that, and she said that she had, been betrayed by her boyfriend, and that she no longer believed in love. And so after Swamiji let her, she, dropped her off, and she left the car, the man turned to Swamiji and said, "Can you imagine not believing in love?" And Swamiji said, "And you call yourself an atheist?" He said, usually people, when they say, I don't believe in God, or they reject a certain aspect of spiritual teaching, it's only because of what they associate with it. Maybe they have been presented an unattractive image of God. That happens all the time. And sort of, why believe in something like that? For example, a very punishing, vindictive God. If you make one mistake, then, that's it. Even a parent, a good parent anyway, is very patient and tolerant, no matter how many mistakes the child makes, because the parent also understands whose job is it to train the child and to help the child. And so if a human parent can behave better than that, then certainly a divine parent should far outstrip even that behavior. So we don't want to get too caught up in definitions and separations and not this or that, but mine, not yours, and all those things. That's, again, Maya. Look to the underlying light, the underlying vibration. Look to find points of agreement, that ways in which we can connect. It reminds me of a story of Nayaswami Haridas. He and his wife Roma, Nayaswami Roma, lead the Ananda Bangalore group. And Haridas Ji was, as a part of Ananda, putting out in a city near Ananda village called Sacramento. It's the capital of California, but isn't as large a city as San Francisco or Los Angeles in California. He was putting out flyers on people's cars. This was before Facebook. And so to advertise, so putting, a flyer on the windshield, under the windshield wiper, advertising Swami Kriyananda's lecture that was coming up, presumably that weekend, something like that. And there was a man who came to his car and saw this flyer, and Haridas was nearby and sort of had a little bit of an eye out, and the man pulled this flyer off and just started shouting. And he saw Haridas, and he came up to him and he started shouting about how his way was the only way and this religion was the only way, and whatever you're trying to put out is completely false, and on, and he just wouldn't stop, because you can kind of say your piece, and someone can say, well, live and let live, and Om Guru, and then let it go. But this man just kept going on and on and on, and finally Haridas just said, "Stop!" And the man sort of stopped, a little bit shocked, and Haridas said, "I respect your right to follow your way." And he said, I am not trying to convince you. I'm never going to convince you. And then Haridas said, and you're never going to convince me to change my way. So why don't we spend our time convincing other people? And the man looked at him and smiled and said, I can live with that. And then he embraced Haridas. So again, even when your ways are completely against each other or opposed, you can find some kind of common ground. Well, at least we are both dedicated, even if in opposite directions. And Swamiji said, if people are thinking badly of you, you can say, well, how nice that they are thinking of me at all. Anyway, it's always wonderful to try to find a way to elevate the situation, because it's all a dream. And I was upset about something. A friend of ours is going through a difficult medical situation, and it really bothered me. And just because I couldn't shake the human aspect of it, we can say it's all God, but this was my friend, and I was really concerned for her. And I called Haridasji and I said to him, I'm concerned, and I just have to say that out loud. And Haridasji said, I am too. And he said, sometimes the dream feels too real. And it was just a perfect way to put it, that just sometimes we get shaken up in the storm. As Master said, if you take the dream seriously, you'll get very hurt and you won't like it, which is to say, if we become too attached. But the answer is not to detach and say, I don't care, it's not real, it's all a dream, and so who cares what happens, because that's just deadening ourselves. We have to see God behind that. We have to feel the love within it. We have to be able to smile at the dream. Again, to enjoy, to be entertained and educated. It has a purpose. And even human love has that purpose of helping us to expand that particularized personal love into impersonal, infinite, expansive love, all-inclusive love. What's also wonderful about this first week's reading is that we hear these deep truths, these cosmic statements about light and sound, and how they are the only things that exist and that they manifest everything. And it sounds all pretty good, but pretty abstract also. And sort of like, the world was created by light. Oh yeah? Yeah, and sound too. Okay. Not necessarily something that we can relate in our daily lives, especially if we're not fully on the before we come to the spiritual path. But then Swamiji takes it into Yoganandaji's experience, his first experience of God, that he gives an autobiography of a yogi as a young boy, and how he saw that light, how he saw the yogis, how he was thrilled by this divine vision, and how he said, from it I salvaged the permanent legacy of seeking God, of finding God, that he said, I'm going to give my life to this, which, again, if you've tasted a strong enough joy or a deep enough thrill, you realize this is the only thing going. This is the only thing there is, and everything else is just a pale imitation. This is the real joy that I want and that I can find. And so that Yoganandaji's particular experience, and even specific statements like this light that I felt or perceived in my forehead. I mean, I remember when I read Autobiography of a Yogi and I read forehead, and I thought, forehead? Is there something going on in the forehead? I didn't know anything about the teachings of yoga at that time. The Autobiography of a Yogi was my introduction to it all. And it was so specific, like if it's in his forehead, is it in my forehead too? Is this something one can actually experience? Is there a system? Is there a way to learn? Is there a teaching? Are there practices that can help us actually experience this light, this sound, this thrill that he describes? Wow, that's what I had been wanting my whole life. I had wanted truth, but I didn't know where to find it or how to find it. I wanted to experience. I didn't want to just read about it, but I wasn't reading anything. As I said, Autobiography of a Yogi was the start for me. It came about because I saw someone who was practicing these teachings of masters at Ananda and practicing Kriya Yoga. I just met him, and I was so impressed with his poise and his calmness that I said, I want to do what you are doing. And I think it was probably more than that, as I've said recently. I think on a subconscious level, I probably recognized Master's vibration, but of course I didn't know it at the time. So let us always remember that anything that we read or study or hear about, that our masters can introduce to us. They can give us that experience. And it's available to all. It's not to separate again. But that may be fine for all. But I am working on myself. And so let me do what I can to practice these techniques, to love God more, to study more, to learn more about Master's teachings. Remember Nayaswami Ananta's immortal statement, because people would often say to him, oh, I'm reading this book by this other teacher, it's just like Master's teachings. This gets said a lot, unfortunately. And someone said that to him, perhaps one too many times. And Anantaji said, it's just like Master's teachings, Master's teachings. Again, truth is universal. It's not a question of that these are the only teachings. But for a disciple, for someone who has dedicated themselves to these teachings, they should be the only teachings, because you can go so deep, so easily. And otherwise, it's just plodding. And I think the only reason why some people seek all extra other teachings here and there is just out of restlessness. Just sort of, let me find something new. This isn't doing it for me today. Let me find something to stimulate or distract myself, and that will be. And I can understand that. I mean, I can appreciate it. But again, just chant. Just look into Master's eyes. Just spend time with him, and for very little investment of energy and time, you get so much back when you're a part of this spiritual family. Of course, if you're part of another spiritual family, the same exact thing would be true. But be loyal to your path. Be focused on it, because it has so much more potential reward in that when you're open in that way. So let us let us really focus this beginning of the year on renewing our vows, renewing our dedication as disciples, as yogis, as devotees, lovers of God, that this is what my life is for, this is what my life is about. And whatever else that I do out of duty or love for my colleagues, for my boss, for my family, let me see that also as opportunities God is giving me to share His love with others, that love through me, and to also to love others as aspects of God, to love the God in them. In other words, the God in me is loving them, and I am also loving the God in them. And to feel that way to elevate every relationship to the divine. And if the other person sees it that way, well, then you're very lucky. But if they don't, which is very common, that's okay. God sees it that way. And we will be nourished and sustained and fulfilled from the inside at the very least. So, Master bless you.